Nigel Farage has attended Conservative Party conference for the first time in 30 years, and he's been getting quite a lot of attention for doing so. Speaking to the Today programme on BBC Radio 4, he said this.
I've been very consistent in the things that I've said over quite a long time. I've never really shifted from those views, whether it's regards, borders, increasing population, attitudes towards small business, net zero, taxes. What's interesting is there's now a wing of the Conservative Party that have woken up to these things, and they're now saying them.
Is there ever a moment you could be involved in this party if it went in the direction you wanted?
Well, if you ask the delegates here, you might be surprised by the answer.
Well, they think you already are. And I would suggest to you, not having an argument about the media, a serious point. Part of the importance of GB News is it might shape who the next leader of the Conservative Party
I
is.
think that's already beginning to happen.
You think, in your role as a broadcaster, you're reshaping the nature of the political debate on the right in Britain?
I think so, and I think perhaps more effectively than I could do standing for election.
GB News execs must be panicking when they hear that. So you think you can politically influence the next election inside the Tories? Yeah, I think I can do that at GB News. That's definitely not what you want regulators to be hearing. I guess Farage doesn't need to join the Tories if the Tories are becoming UKIP. Of course, there's a strong argument that Farage himself is the most influential Conservative in Britain since Margaret Thatcher. And just last week, the New Statesman said he was the most powerful Conservative in the country, above even Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He's done that without being a member of the Tories, like I say, since 1992. But could that be about to change? After all, Farage not only attended Tory conference this week, but was thrust centre stage and was even spotted dancing with Priti Patel. At this point of whether Farage is set to join the Tories was argued out on BBC Politics Live.
I'm a friend of Nigel's. I think he's a very effective campaigner. And I think most of his political views are views I share. I think Nigel is broadly a Tory and always has been.
Right. Yes, well,
if he wanted to join, I can't think his membership would be refused.
Look, I think he's most recently been advocating voting for another political party. That is not consistent with being a member of the Conservative Party.
Let me just repeat the question from Andrew. The question was, would you welcome Nigel Farage into the Conservative Party?
No, I don't think I would, because I think he's repeatedly, for the last 30 years or more, advocated voting for other political parties. I think he said he doesn't want to see the Conservative Party succeed, so I don't think I would.
But we're always delighted if people cross the floor. If a Labour member who'd been a Labour member for 30 years and came across and said, I'd like to be a Tory, we'd be absolutely thrilled to pieces.
Now, in that clip, Jacob Rees-Mogg said he is friends with Farage. They work alongside each other at GB News with shows back-to-back, so that's hardly a surprise. So it's hard to believe Farage didn't already know Rees-Mogg's opinions on this matter. It's even possible he knew what he would say on television. Later, speaking to GB News, where both Farage and Rees-Mogg have shows, Rishi Sunak said this.
You may have noticed Nigel Farage is wandering around your conference, first time in decades. Would you have him back as a member of the Tory party?
Now, the Tory party is a very broad church, right? I welcome lots of people who want to subscribe to our ideals, to our values.
So Rees-Mogg says yes, Greg Hands says no, and Rishi Sunak says maybe. So could Farage be on the cusp of rejoining the Tories? Remember, he left in 1992. Well, the man himself went on to say this to Christopher Hope, GB News' political editor.
Before I arrived here yesterday, people were saying, would they even let me in through the front door? And now you're saying, would he let me in the party?
Would you, yes or no? Come on, well exclusive.
What party?
Will you join it?
Would I want to join a party that's put the tax rate up to the highest in over 70 years, that has allowed net migration to run at over 500,000 a year, that has not used Brexit to deregulate and help small businesses? No, no and no.
But you're here as a journalist, you're here talking about things.
Yes.
Join the Tories, do things.
Well, I tell you what, I achieved a lot more outside of the Tory party than I ever could have done from within it. And actually, what I'm seeing here are ideas that I've talked about. From 2019, when net zero was passed into law without even a vote.
Without a vote, crucial.
I've said the agenda's mad, it's unfair. If you're going to do this to us, we should have a referendum on it. Yeah. I've been arguing about ECHR. It should have been part of the Brexit deal. So what I'm seeing, Chris, I'm seeing a wing of the Conservative Party who are now basically saying what I've been saying for many, many years.
That's why they want you back in.
And so, well, half the party would love me in, the other half would blackball me.
A few minutes later, Farage shared that clip on Twitter adding this. Why would I join a Conservative Party that doesn't believe in anything? Pretty decisive answer there. So what kind of game is being played here? Are Rees-Mogg, Farage and GB News trying to publicly humiliate the Prime Minister? And if you listened carefully to what Farage told Hope, you would have heard the words, at the moment. At the moment? What has to change before you decide to join? All of this serves to underscore who is in charge of the right at the moment, and it certainly isn't the Prime Minister. Helena, what's the betting Farage joins the Tories, but only after 2024?
So there's three things about Nigel Farage. First of all, he's very, very outspoken. Secondly, he's always ideologically consistent. And third of all, he always has a plan. He had a very long-term plan, hence why UKIP did what they did. They never got any seats apart from when Douglas Carswell defected to UKIP. And outside of that, they've never been electorally successful. But they were electorally successful in being able to force David Cameron to have a referendum on the European Union. They got their Brexit without winning anything more than one seat in an election. So he's clearly a man who knows the way that the political system in this country works and how to influence it, even if it's from the outside. As he pointed out astutely there, he's been able to have much more influence outside of the Conservative Party than within it. Now, of course, he then formed the Brexit Party afterwards because he felt he was being betrayed by both May and then subsequently Boris Johnson, given that the kind of main thrust of what Reform UK is saying right now, which is the successor to the Brexit Party, is that we've not really done Brexit properly. Firstly, because we haven't done all of the free market things that he wants to do. But on the second hand, is that Northern Ireland is still technically a part of the single market. The Windsor Framework and the Northern Ireland Protocol were things that was a big wedge between the Brexiteers of Boris Johnson ilk and the Brexiteers of Nigel Farage's ilk. Anne Widdecombe has been plenty of times as a Reform UK member on GB News talking about leaving Northern Ireland behind and separating the United Kingdom with the hard border down the Irish Sea, potentially that was happening at the time. So he views, and Sunak is the Windsor Framework architect, so he views him as a traitor. I can only assume as well, given that it follows that same kind of logic. So this is why Reform UK have been attacking the Conservatives very, very strongly. It's not like 2019, where the Brexit Party wanted to ensure that Brexit happened by putting Boris Johnson into power by only running against Corbyn. They're not doing that this time round. Ben Habib, who's another person who is very high up in Reform UK, was on GB News and he explicitly said there can be no reward for incumbency for people who fail. There can be no reward of incumbency for failure. And they intend to stand Reform UK candidates against the Conservatives in every single seat in the country. They clearly are trying to weaken the Conservative Party, who Farage, I'm assuming, and Tyson, people of that ilk, believe are no longer conservative. Richard Tyson even described them as being a socialist party, if you could believe such a thing. Now, what this means is that come the next election, when Nigel Farage I think, and people from Reform UK have openly said they want to ensure that the Tories lose as a punishment for their failures in their eyes, so that there can be a remaking of the Conservative Party. Nigel Farage has admitted it in these segments that we've watched. There is a wing of the Conservative Party that now agrees with him. They agree with him on the free market ideas. They agree with him on the hard version of Brexit. They agree with him on the issues with regards to immigration. It may be a kind of hodgepodge of different sects of the Conservative Party, but all of the wet Tories who are in charge throughout the time when he was on the outside looking in, they're now nowhere near the ascendancy within the party. So if there is a chance for him to become a Conservative politician again, it can only be after what I can only assume is a deliberate desire to destroy the party from the outside so that he can ascend from the party from the inside. But again, this can only be speculation, but it seems reasonable given what Reform UK have been doing and saying.
Yeah, I think that's entirely right, Helena. I think he would join the Conservative Party if he thought there was a possibility of him leading it. And there's food for thought. There's a fascinating article on all of this over at the Mail. They write that a former cabinet minister has said Farage would, quote, easily win a Tory leadership election if he made it to the membership, but Rishi would never let him on the candidate list. The source to the Mail added this. He would be a dominant figure and he couldn't toe the line. He would be like the scorpion crossing the river on the back of the fox. He would sting you because that's just what he does. We should probably adopt the policies, but not the man. But Lichfield MP Michael Fabricant disagreed. He said this to GB News. I think we should get on our hands and knees and beg him to rejoin. We should award him a knighthood that he should have had years ago. Then there's Tim Montgomery. He's the founder of Conservative Home and a former speechwriter for William Hague. He tweeted this. I walked into the conference earlier with Nigel Farage. He got quite the reception. I'm convinced party members would choose him as leader if they could. And here's Farage, again, being quite clear that his war isn't just against Labour, but a chunk of Tory MPs too.
Just having walked around here, talking to ordinary people, Conservative Party members, for goodness sake, I mean, they know what Conservative Party members by and large want, and they do want controls to legal immigration, and they want to stop the boats. And yet they're scared, do you think, to go on stage and say that?
They've been scared for years.
To an audience full of people who would stand up and applaud.
Yeah, but it is the social unacceptability of saying these things. And what's really interesting, in 13 years of Conservative government, the centre of gravity on these debates has shifted so far to the left, it's almost unbelievable. I mean, there were things that David Blunkett was saying as Home Secretary 20 years ago that would now be called with the BBC far right.
Yeah.
That is how far to the left we've gone. But it also reflects that the type of people in politics. Most of the MPs here are literally career politicians. It'll be the same next week at the Labour conference. They're in it for a career, not for the change they can bring or the conviction that they hold.
Really extraordinary. I never thought that Farage would join the Conservatives. I really thought that his political career had reached its climax with Brexit. Maybe not. Maybe there is an even bigger chapter to come.